most stressful events in human experience, number one is the loss of one of your intimates in life. That's a parent, a husband, a wife, a child.
I'm Brooke Brown, founder and executive director of Keiki o Emalia, a nonprofit bereavement program for grieving children, teens, and their families. I began working on this in 2014, several months after the death of our daughter Emalia, who died of colorectal cancer shortly after their son's 3rd birthday. I wanted a program here on Maui that all children, all teens, regardless of their ethnicity or ability to pay, could attend so that they could process their grief and not grow into adults that had problems in relationships, or teens that had behavioral problems and were hampered by unprocessed grief.
I was 17 years old when I tragically lost my mother through murder. It was very devastating. In fact, I witnessed the event. And so it wasn't just the grievance process that I went through, but it was the grievance of losing my mother and my brother and my whole family structure all in one moment. My brother was who committed the crime. And it was very devastating. And you know, as a teenager, you already feel so alone so much of the time. And so to be a teenager and going through grief, you feel even more alone.
Well, what you find for the most part for people who've gone through that kind of grief and loss is that it fundamentally affects the way they see the world, and they continue to live in that grief and loss. So they approach the world from a point of view of loss, and there's oftentimes a kind of lostness for them, where they don't quite know how to orient themselves in the world. Also, if they were in any way connected to the death, there can be shame and guilt, and that compounds those feelings of grief that never got resolved.
So my name's Emily, and my father passed away from stage 4 lung cancer when I was 15 years old. I think it would have been really nice for me to have other kids my age or around my age who were going through the same thing, just to have them to talk to and see how they were going through their grieving process, and I could share what I was going through.
What I use a lot with children is grieve freely and grieve honestly, because they think I need to have this rolled out in this manner, and that's not the case. They may not feel anything for weeks, months, years.
I grew up in a household that we didn't talk about emotions. You know, everyone from outside thought, oh my gosh, they have such a great life and look at this great family. But we never discussed how you're feeling and why you're upset or why you sad or angry. So when we're going through this whole process, and my sister was 12 and I was 17 when my mom passed away, you know, I didn't know how to help her either, because of the fact that I didn't know what I was feeling myself, and nobody around us knew how to help us and talk to us about it.
You know, I think one of the things we find with traumatic experiences with children is in the short window, sometimes they are kind of seemingly okay, but then things start to unravel after that. And you really start to see the signs and symptoms of the grief and loss come a month later or 2 months later. It's not necessarily an immediate process for the child. So you really have to watch the child, not in the short term, but in the long term for what is actually impacting the child.
A group where I could speak to other teenagers or children who went through the same thing as me at that time, like Keiki o Emalia has, would have been beneficial, because I'm sure those children would have been able to relate to me.
The families that I actually have been working with through Keiki or Emalia, it has seen differences in their children. More open to wanting to talk, wanting to be more family involved. Whereas before they didn't want to talk about anything. They wanted to be on their own. So it's been such a great resource for my work. It makes my job so much easier when they're able to feel comfortable talking about their loved one that is no longer there. When somebody feels comfortable, you feel like you're at home. You're in a safe place that you can talk about whatever is on your mind and know that you're in a safe place.
I think it's very important that people know that we just provide a safe, comfortable, and confidential place or setting in which to grieve. I think people here or anywhere need to know that the safety that we give them, because we're not therapists, the safety comes with the peer group really talking with themselves and knowing that anything they say will not leave the room.
I lost my dad when I was 15 years old to stomach cancer. I didn't have a grieving group to attend, which I wish I had then. I took a lot of wrong turns growing up because I was incarcerated. Not having a grieving group, I think if I did have one then, I probably would have had the support and not make all the wrong choices. So I started self-medicating myself with alcohol and marijuana and ice, which it led me down a wrong path. If you're parents and you have children, having a grieving process group for them would be very helpful, and having Na Keiki or Emalia present now in the island, I think it would be a big help for all our Keikis today that would be grieving the loss of a father or a mom or a loved one.
If you have a child or a close family member that has experienced this loss, don't make the assumption that they're okay because you don't see any evidence that they're not. One thing I learned in police work is always assume that there's more to a story than what appears on the surface, because there always is. So prioritize that child, because that child needs you to do that for them.
Well, if a parent were to say, I don't know if my kids really want to come, I'd say, well, of course they probably wouldn't want to come to talk about this really painful subject, but it's worth a try, because what we've seen with kids that leave at the end is quite amazing to us. We see them come in being pretty much urged by their parents and almost dragged in, shuffling along, sitting down with their head bowed and kind of deer in the headlights, to comfortable in their skins, standing up, maybe having a piece of pizza, casually talking, just a lot more at ease within their body. And there's a nice feeling when they walk out. They want to come back. They think they want to come back. Doesn't mean they will, but that moment is what I've seen happen again and again.
The group dynamic of the Na Keiki o Emalia, since I've been working there, I would say it's, since it's driven by the children themselves, I think it's very, very powerful. It makes it more powerful than any counseling probably would have, is the way I feel. And that's what I love about the dynamic of that group so much. So they talk between themselves, and they help one another, and they listen, and I just think that would have been so wonderful to have, because even I was raised as a Catholic, and the Catholic school I went to, not even any of the nuns mentioned it, the priest didn't mention it, the children didn't mention it. You know, even your best friends, they didn't want, to hurt you, probably they're thinking in those days, so nobody talked about it. So you were really left and stuck with your own stuff.
Children have to know that they can talk about anything they want or not at all. It's totally up to each individual as to how they grieve. And we're not to interfere with that, we just facilitate that. Everything is designed so that the peer groups are really healing themselves.
The whole point is to provide ease around this topic for them so that they can breathe again and start thinking again and start having confidence in their decisions. Parents bring their children, they go in their separate places, kids with the kids and the parents with the parents, and then they come back together to leave. And oftentimes that ride home is a beautiful moment for things to happen. And that doesn't mean they have to speak about it, but they're together. They're not alone, they're together.
You see in the groups that we see with the young people, they're far more open, I think, than probably they would be with counseling, because of just the fact that somebody their own age identifies. So that's pretty powerful.
The most beautiful strength about Na Keiki o Emalia is that children, middle school children and teenagers can help each other. That's the biggest strength. We can teach adults how to hold the space easily, but it's the other kids in the group, little kids, middle school kids, and teenagers that really help each other.
Now, Keiki o Emalia doesn't cost you anything but your time. And if you think you are too busy to find help for your child, you need to reprioritize your schedule.
Grief and loss is something that affects people for the rest of their lives. So getting the help you need is a crucial element in helping yourself to heal as a parent, and getting your children the help they need is something that begins to set them on a different course for the rest of their lives.
Thank you for watching. If you or someone you know might benefit from our program, please contact us. Our services are free and we're open to everyone.